Hey, before we get started, let me ask you something. Is your leadership or management team burning out? It's a serious question because burnout at the top, hey, it spreads fast. It shows up in poor decision making, toxic culture, and disengaged teams. But when leaders are grounded, energized, and supported, everything changes. That's the work I do with executives and their managers. I help them step off the hamster wheel and put well-being back at the center. The result? Leaders who make better choices, teams that are more engaged, and companies where people actually want to give their best. And that's where everyone wins. Your people, your culture, and your bottom line. If you're ready to build a healthier, burnout-resistant, and more effective leadership culture, hey, I'd love to help. Find me on LinkedIn or reach me on my website at marcelschwantes.com. Welcome to the Love in Action Podcast. I'm your host, executive coach, speaker, and author, Marcel Schwantes. I believe that when we show up with our full humanity to work and lead from a place of love, joy, purpose, care, and inclusion, it's going to make a radical difference in your leadership, your business, and your bottom line. This is a show about actionable, practical love, the verb, as a leadership and business strategy. Let's get rolling. Hey gang, welcome back. Glad you're here. I hope the fall season is treating you well. It is an absolutely gorgeous, crisp day outside right now. And I'm here in the outskirts of my home base of Chattanooga, Tennessee, where the deer roam wild. So let me set the table for today's conversation. Okay, you know that moment in leadership when what used to work just doesn't anymore? You know, the strategies that got you here suddenly stop producing results and you're left wondering, what the heck's going on? What am I missing, right? So chances are it's a blind spot, okay? I deal with blind spots all the time in my role as a leadership coach. I have blind spots. We all have blind spots, okay? Whether you admit it or not, you know, that's those unseen habits, assumptions, or behaviors that hold us back. And sometimes it's something that we don't even realize we're doing, right? Other times what feels normal to us looks like a red flag for everyone else around you. They might see it, but we don't. And until we can spot those blind spots, we can't fully grow as leaders or reach our potential. And that's where our guest today, Dr. Martin Dubin, comes in. His book is called Blindspotting: How to See What's Holding You Back as a Leader. If you're watching on YouTube, there is the cover. And this book is really a sort of a practical roadmap for doing just that. Marty is a clinical psychologist turned serial entrepreneur turned executive coach who has worked with hundreds of C-suite senior executives from Fortune 500 companies and with Silicon Valley venture capital firms and their portfolio companies. Marty breaks down the 6 types of blind spots and takes us inside real coaching sessions where leaders uncover the behaviors that have been like tripping them up, right? This book is eye-opening. It's relatable for a lot of you who are listening, who are leaders and entrepreneurs, right? And it's full of tools to help you see yourself more clearly so you can lead with more awareness, more impact, and greater authenticity. And speaking of Dr. Dubin, he now joins us. Marty, welcome to the Love in Action Podcast.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Me too. All right. Well, we start like this. You ready?
I'm ready.
What's your story?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question for a psychologist, right? That's kind of where things always start. So I trained as a clinical psychologist, and I thought, that's what I would do for my whole career. That I opened up I did a little teaching and other things and then opened a private practice. And I thought, well, every 45, 50 minutes, I usher out one patient and usher in another one. And what they don't tell you in graduate school, I love the work. I just didn't like sitting in an office all day.
Yeah.
And that was like, if I look back, I was finding ways to get out of my office and do a consultation here, do other things there. And I I'm just was too curious about the world and other things, and really had a business instinct. And I look back on it, I had done entrepreneurial things in college and high school, a t-shirt business, other kinds of things, but that wasn't really part of my identity. But I got interested, healthcare started to change. A colleague and I started a mental health, behavioral health business to manage the behavioral health benefits for insurance companies. So I transitioned to a business leader and a CEO, and we grew the company. And then we sold it to one of the biggest insurance companies, health insurers. And then I found this whole area of where business and psychology come together as
Yeah.
leadership. I didn't know it was a thing. And it finally felt like, oh, now now I'm doing the right thing for me. This fits.
That's great. That's great. So I want to play around with the title since you're a clinical psychologist. My wife, by the way, is a master's level therapist who counsels entrepreneurs as well. And, they deal with I'm sure you can relate to this in many of your sessions. So many of the people that she works with are dealing with some kind of trauma in their background, in their upbringing. Maybe they have some addiction that they have to overcome. And so I showed her the book cover and she read it. And the first thing she said is, hey, blind spotting, that's a therapy modality, but that might be too clinical here. So to me, as a coach myself, who doesn't have the background that you and my wife have, the clinical setting, blind spotting suggests there's like something that we can't see in ourselves, right? And I think
Yes.
it's a brilliant title, by the way. So talk about the title.
Yeah. When I transitioned to being a coach, and then I would talk with my previous colleagues at psychotherapists, like your wife, and yeah, well, what do you do? Like, what's coaching? How's it different than psychotherapy? And I have a long answer and everything else. And after a while, I realized I'm still doing the same thing I did as a psychotherapist. It's
Mm,
all about self-awareness. And maybe that's what your wife kind of resonated to. You know, as a leader, you and I can read the same books, learn the same science of leadership, and how we apply it, we can take away the same exact knowledge, but how we apply it is different because of who we are. And so we are the tool of our leadership. And I think that is the most important insight that I have. If I can help people become more self-aware of how they show up, that's how they can elevate their leadership.
yeah, yeah, agreed completely. So, you have such a fascinating background, right? With the clinical side as a psychologist, serial entrepreneur, you have seen probably, I mean, how many scenarios of dealing with founders and entrepreneurs trying to scale businesses and dealing with all of the issues that a typical entrepreneur has to deal with, right? Trying to grow a business and now you coach them. So I'm sure that has so much to do. You probably have a wealth of information that led you to write this book, Blind Spotting, because you saw firsthand, you have
Right.
firsthand accounts of so many different blind spots. And we'll get into the six in a minute here, folks. Okay. But talk about the spark that
Yeah.
got you to go, okay, I got to write this book.
Yeah. Well, actually, so kind of it was maybe starting year two of COVID when we were still in the house and still didn't know if we were able to get out.
Oh,
And I just was like, I've had an unusual career. What do I know, and what still don't I know? What am I still trying to figure out? And I just, quite frankly, just to occupy my brain, I just started sitting down on my couch and writing. I wasn't intending to write a book. I was just kind of getting my thoughts together. And then after a while, I thought, oh my God, this is probably a book. I should get serious about it. And your point about the entrepreneurs is really right on target because, quite frankly, they're blind spots. They're just less sophisticated leaders. Most of these people are young, early in their career, brilliant, have a brilliant idea, just this passion to change the world in some way. And if their market and their business take off, all of a sudden they have a company around them, and then their leadership flaws just show up all over the place. So, and I was working with very sophisticated leaders of huge companies, and I could help them, but it was like harder to figure out really what was going on in many ways because they're so sophisticated. But then as I started to put the two together, it was like the same problems, just in a real raw form in
Mm,
these entrepreneurs. And that's what helped me kind of bring the ideas together in the book.
mm. So, I'm curious, why is it so hard for leaders, for entrepreneurs, for high level people to spot their own blind spots?
Well, it's true for all of us. I mean,
Hmm.
this is a book. I mean, it is a leadership book, but it's a psychology book. You know, if you think about an operating computer operating system, there are errors and flaws in the system. It's the same for us. And one way I think to think about it is we are pattern seeking organisms. What do we like? What don't we like? What do we pay attention to? What do we ignore? And we develop that over our life, and it's just default. It's natural. So we pay attention to certain things and we don't pay attention to other things. And just like your lead in of things that could be going right for you, then start to not go right. It's because you're not paying attention. The situation you're in now is a little different, and you're not paying attention to some of the cues there
Yeah.
and so you're getting tripped up. So, and those are just real quick, those of your audience that are interested in research, there's two researchers, Dunning and Kruger, have done a lot of really fun and interesting research about how unself-aware we are. We think we're a lot more self-aware than we really are.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Should we get into the six now,
Sure.
or what do you think? Is there maybe a way for you to want to introduce or segue into the six categories of blind spots?
Yeah, maybe. So this is not that complicated. I think that's the deal. I mean, I think if you, as your readers read it, it'll be like, oh yeah, that's pretty obvious. And I think it is, but until you kind of turn the flashlight on and light it up, you just don't notice it. And I guess the one thing, the kind of the why is this even important is there's so much in life you can't control. In the economy, in your own business, in your own life, the one thing you do have control over is yourself. And what's really a key question I had to figure out in the book, and that I think the thread will run through what we're going to talk about, is
Yeah.
what can you change and what can't you change about yourself? And so, as we talk about it, I would encourage the listeners to think about it through that lens. Okay, there's some things about me that is who I am. I just need to be aware of it. And then there are ways I can make some changes in that.
Yeah. So what are the six categories of blind spots? Break them down for us.
Yeah, so the six blind spots are, came up with the six, and then I had to think about, I showed that draft of my book to a colleague, and she said, "These six are great, Marty, but I need to draw them like on a napkin when I'm in front of a leader." And I said, "I know, I've been struggling with how to visualize it." So here's what I came up with, and this may help your listeners, hold it in their mind. So think of it like a target. There's an outside ring, a middle ring, and a center kind of bullseye. And it's organized that way because the outside ring is what we can become most aware of, and it's where where we can make changes. And so the two on the outside ring are our identity and our behavior. We can easily say, I'm a psychologist, I'm a father, I'm a son, whatever it is, our identity, and we can look at our own behavior. Then in the next middle ring are three that are much more difficult to change, that are pretty hardwired, and that's our traits, our emotions, and our intellect. And then in the middle is the sixth one, which is our motives. And that's the engine in the system. That's the why. Why are we doing what we're doing? What's propelling us? And that's a lot of times we know why we're doing things. I know why I showed up today on your podcast. But there are a lot of times there's a lot of whys that we're just not aware of. So the whole idea is to peel back the layers and find out where your blind spots are in these six areas.
Okay. Identity, motive, traits, emotion, intellect, and behavior. So
Right.
let's start on the outer ring. Okay, so I'm going to pick out identity. Okay, so outer ring in your model, identity is, tell me if I'm correct here, how we see ourselves and how others see us. Is that accurate?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So why is this such a rich source of blind spots for us?
Yeah, I mean, these are the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. This is the who. Who
Yeah.
are we? It's your name tag. And blind spots show up often when we're transitioning in business, when we're transitioning from one role to another. Same thing in life. You know, when you transitioned from being a married couple to being a parent, that was a transition, and that's a new identity that you took on at that point, and all of a sudden you start filtering your life through that identity. Diaper commercials become interesting to you, right? And school tuition and all sorts of things. And so if you still continue to behave like your old identity of a couple without a kid, you know, life smacks you in the face pretty well. Well, that happens also at work. If you think about the subject matter expert, the marketing guru, and they get promoted to become the supervisor now, a manager of other people, and they still hold on to that identity of I still want to read all the marketing stuff and I want to know the most about marketing, and they're not paying attention to the things they should be reading and learning about how to be a leader. All of a sudden they like, how come I'm struggling in this new role? And one other point on that that's really important, if you take on that new role, you should feel some sense of loss for the previous role. You know, when you become a parent, it's like, damn, I can't stay up till 1 in the morning anymore. And now that you're the manager of other people, it's like, darn, Joe that I used to supervise now knows more about marketing than I do. And so that sense of grief, which is fine, and loss is a part of transition. So it's hard because we really have to make some psychological work in those transition moments.
Okay, so I'm going to make an assumption, and I don't know if this falls in identity. So a lot of leaders, you coach them, I coach them, have false beliefs, or they have a mindset that no longer serves them well, and so it holds them back, right? Perhaps it's acquiring the traits of a toxic boss from 3 companies prior, and
Yes,
now they're acting like that toxic boss. Does this fall under identity as a blind spot?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's a great example, isn't it? Because that's subtle. You know, it's like, oh, this is the way I'm supposed to lead, like this previous boss did. And you probably don't identify it as toxic. You say, well, you know, I learned under him and he got results and he got promoted. So I guess that's what you're supposed to do. And so you just start doing it, and you can become unaware of that. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. I'm working towards getting right to the core, which is the center, that bullseye, right? Which is the motive part. But let's talk about the other 3, the traits, emotion, and intellect. Did I get that right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said that these things are hard to change. Is that right?
Right. So you know, these are parts of the personality that are pretty hardwired.
Uh-huh.
We can change them to a certain extent, but your emotional makeup, you know, whether you're an emotionally expressive kind of person, and or whether you're kind of reserved with your emotions, whether you're very aware of your emotions or not, you can get better at all of that, but it's pretty hardwired. You're working against, you know, what you were born and how you were raised. Your intellect, I don't know that we can add 10 IQ points, you know, once we're adults, but, you know, we can acquire a lot of knowledge, but our core intellect and how we think and how our brain's wired, that's pretty set. And the traits are the adjectives that people use to describe us, and we describe ourselves. And again, you can say, oh, you know, I should be a little more, I'm introverted, but I know I need to be more extroverted, and I'm going to be I'm going to a big meeting or a cocktail party, and I better get out, you know, so you can push yourself beyond your normal traits.
Right.
But all that stuff is pretty hardwired.
Right. Well, and even we're not asking people to change their personality.
No.
Most personalities are fixed, but we're asking them to maybe tap into an area that is an opportunity for them to develop. When say you show up in, like you said, if you show up in a networking event and your tendency is to shrink back and be an introvert and a fly on the wall, I mean, a wallflower, You want to go against the grain a little bit, stretch yourself into maybe an uncomfortable spot just to be able to be more effective in that situation, right? So we're not saying you need to change from an introvert to an extrovert. We're just asking you to kind of just get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and stretch in
Absolutely.
that direction.
Absolutely. I think the most important thing is to just, as I said, be aware of who you are. This isn't about changing yourself. It's about
Yeah.
accentuating maybe your strengths and being aware of where got gaps. I didn't use the word weakness anywhere in the book. I don't like that concept. We are who we are, and we just need to, be comfortable with that. And then, it's like a tool, that's the tool I got. So let me use it the best way I can. And when I need to kind of change it a little bit, I'll make some changes around the edges. But it's really important to just be aware of who you are. This is not about massive change at all.
Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah.
other message in the book. I talk about small tweaks. And if you think about, athletes, especially elite athletes, they're just working on those small things to get a little bit better. And I worked with very successful leaders.
Yeah.
And so it's just really getting better. That's all.
Yeah. So I want to drill down on a couple of those. Emotion. Let's take emotion. Okay. Um, Maybe there are feelings that may even surprise us. So I wanted to ask you, in your sessions with high level clients, what emotional red flags usually come up for you in your sessions that any leader should pay attention to when it comes to the emotion blind spot?
Yeah. So a lot of times we're aware of our emotions. We know how we're feeling, but all of us have lots of experiences where we were blindsided by an emotion, right? We walk out of a meeting and say, why am I so upset about what Sally said in the meeting? And you just felt your blood pressure rise and get upset. And you just like, why is that really bothering me so much? And maybe you overreacted in the meeting because of that, or and you can't go to sleep that night. It's still spinning around in your head. So that is a big clue of something. That's something to figure out, because that's a part of who you are, and it's probably connected to your motives. Because usually strong emotions are when either a motive, a drive we have inside us is getting satisfied, or it's getting blocked, and we have a very strong feeling. But one other thing I want to say, my emotion chapter will sound familiar to your listeners of EQ and all of that. But the one difference is why is it so important to get a hold of all these emotions? It's good just to be, like, as a human being, it helps us in the world to know how we're feeling, to understand how other people are feeling. It just helps us in interpersonal relationships. But it's all about being strategic with your emotions. If you know how you're feeling, emotions are powerful in work. They're powerful to motivate people. They're powerful for your own motivation. And so you can get very decisive and strategic the more knowledge you have about how you feel and how other people feel.
Yeah, yeah, well put. So the intellect blind spot is interesting to me. You talk about, different kinds of intelligence, right? Some people it's just IQ, others have street smarts, others are like creative geniuses, right? So how do blind spots show up in this realm of the intellect?
Yeah, I became aware as I was coaching and working with people, and just in my own life too. Some of the people go to a high school reunion 20 years later, and some of the people that were just like C students have just, knocked it out of the ballpark and are super successful. And the brilliant ones, did okay, but not great. And so we fetishize IQ, and especially psychologists do that. And this chapter is really a message of that's important, absolutely, but that's only one type of intelligence. And what's important is to figure out kind of I have four types, as you mentioned, what's your set point on each of those? Do you have that IQ part, that horsepower, I call it? Or are you speed of processing? You're just fast on your feet and you can process really quickly. Or is it kind of this street savvy, your head's on a pivot and you just are noticing all sorts of things? Or is it this creative intellect? And so know where you are in that. And then surround yourself with people who are great in those other types. Those are the best teams when all those different types are represented and when the leader knows how to bring all of those types of intelligence together to solve problems.
Yeah, that's great. And I can pick up a hint of emotional intelligence in doing that
Yes.
as
The
well.
street savvy person is usually really high in emotional intelligence.
Okay. So, you deal with some of the brightest, smartest leaders. I have them too, and sometimes they trip up on their own intellect, and maybe this is part B of the question, right? For leaders
Yeah.
who see themselves as smart and well informed, like, hey, I have all the answers. I got it all together here. Okay, what might they be at risk here for?
Yeah, there's a couple pieces of that. That's a really great question. Because some leaders really feel the awesome responsibility of leadership, maybe too much, and they don't rely on the team and everything else, and so they feel it's my responsibility to have the answer. It's my responsibility to listen to all the input and make the decision. And so when and they may not be aware of that responsibility. It's just, again, a part of their default personality. And so they think they have to be the smartest person in the room all the time. And that creates all sorts of problems. It cuts other people off from contributing if they feel like it's a competitive environment of who's smarter. It doesn't allow other people to contribute into the decision. If the person is not only tries to be the smartest in the room, but wants to be quick on their decisiveness, okay, I've got the answer. I'm all done. We don't need to talk anymore. And so there's a lot of traps in that kind of approach of relying on your intellect too much and feeling that responsibility and that speed of decision.
Yeah, gosh, as you were talking, I'm thinking, I see the role that the strength of humility plays here as a leader to kind of check in with the egotistical side of ourselves to say, okay, maybe I need to lean on the strengths of my team who may have the answer to a problem or may have the solution to a problem, right? And I mean, that takes some humility to be able to break through the sort of your own idea that you're the only one that has all the answers because your team may be smarter than you and you just don't know it.
Yeah, and it gets so complicated, and that's why this work is so fascinating. I had one leader I was working with where I did a 360, interview people around the leader, tell me about him, and he was described as both humble and arrogant. And it was like, whoa, how does that happen? And I met him, and as I worked with him, it was really true. His baseline was being very humble, just a really nice, warm, humble guy. But he did what I just talked about a moment ago. He felt he had to be the hero. He felt that awesome responsibility. And so he would cut people off when he thought, and he was very, very smart, brilliant academically. And so when he thought he had the answer, he would cut people off. And that's when he appeared arrogant. And so people said, it's so interesting. He's humble until he isn't. And then he's arrogant.
Wow. Okay, so we arrive at the center of your model. This is like the core of, I guess, of all your blind spots. Why did you feel you had to choose motive as and place it at the center? Why motive? Why is it so important?
Yeah. So it is what drives us, and it is the why. And I know that's an important part of your approach to your podcast. And that was your kind of first question to me. Like, what's my story? What's my why? And it is, at the end of the day, that is probably the single most important area to be aware of about ourselves. And as I said, it's sometimes hard to get a hold of. There was a organizational psychologist from Harvard, David McClellan, I don't know, 40 years ago or more, talked about three core motives in business. The motive for or drive for power, for affiliation, and for achievement. That's a good place for your listeners to start. Is like, how important are each of those three to me? Is achievement the most important thing? Like, I just always have to get things done. I always have to get, the best and push myself so far on that, push my team so far, and maybe not pay attention to the affiliation, the emotional companionship needs. And maybe I'm low on that, but people on my team are high on that, and I'm not paying attention to that. And power needs, which is really control over yourself and over others. Maybe I'm too independent at work because I just want 100% control over my world, and I don't want anybody else to dabble in what I'm doing. So I have these real strong, power and control things. So knowing and then we have lots of personal motives that are varied in a lot of ways. And I've got interesting stories in the book about that. So it is trying to figure out what drives you. And again, just accept it as who you are. And with that awareness, now figure out when you need to dial it up a little or dial it down a little or pay attention to the other motives that are around you and around other people.
So is this where the realm of personal values falls into this category of motive?
Yeah, there's two things. When I came up with these six, I had a lot more, a lot fewer. It was back and forth. And the two that stuck with me the most were values and beliefs. Like, where do they fit in here? Because they're hugely important. And I think they fit because they're kind of across the boundaries of a couple of these. A value is intellectual. It's like, it's a word, it's something that you can describe and it's a concept, but it also has strong emotional power associated with it. And it results in you're driven to achieve your values. So I think values and beliefs are kind of another layer above the six, where the six kind of come in. It's a great place to try to figure out your motives. If altruism, is a big, you're doing a lot of things to give to charity and be involved in those things, then you probably have an altruism motive in there. Your value, is being shown up in that kind of way.
So when does it become a blind spot, though? Is it when we're being incongruent with our values and our beliefs and our intentions, and then so now you're out of alignment with yourself? So then is that the motive blind spot mostly?
It could be that. I mean, you could go to work. I've seen this happen where somebody went to work for a new company and they thought it was a perfect fit for them. And then they realized the culture just really wasn't about who they're about. And at a deep level, it was a conflict on a value basis. And then it's a really tough decision about what do you do about all of that. So it can happen that way. Again, that's kind of like, it's not about you. It's about you in a situation. So in one situation, everything was aligned. In another situation, you're kind of out of alignment. So it can show up in a lot of different ways. But it also can show up in just overemphasizing a particular motive that is just not fitting the situation well. And a big part of this is stress.
No.
When we're under stress, if you think about the fight-flight response, I mean, all you care about is survival. No other motive is important to you at that point. And so when we're under stress, we narrow our motives and we can over-index on a particular motive. And again, if we're not aware of that, not taking care of ourselves in terms of our stress, then we can over-index on a motive.
Yeah, this has been such a good conversation because we really need to understand what holds us back, and the blind spots that you came up with are, for me, are so crucial in our quest for becoming more successful when we understand all of these patterns, right? And our true motives and our identity and even the emotions that may be tripping us up. So it's really, really useful to go through this book. So how do you recommend a leader get started? Maybe what's the first small step someone listening can take this week to address their blind spots?
Yeah, I mean, So here's one quick one, and it's on the trait part. We didn't talk about too much, but it's almost the easiest one to get a hold of. So our traits are often our strengths. What got you really, what do you think, what are the adjectives that you describe yourself? I'm hardworking, or I'm loyal, or whatever it might be. So think about that. Think about those two or three things that really contribute to your success at work, and then add the modifier TOO in front of it. What happens when you're too organized, when you're too creative, when you're too determined, when you're too confident? And that probably is a blind spot for you because there's some situations where you're overdoing your strength. That's a really maybe the quickest one that your listeners can kind of get a hold of and begin to kind of think about and become more self-aware.
That's good. Okay, as we wind down here, is there any question I should have asked that I didn't that our listeners have to know?
All of this, as you said, the book is about a framework to kind of figure out where you should pay attention to be able to improve your performance at work, and then to go about the change. And so just the one part about I have a chapter on how do you change? And quite frankly, it's not that hard. The hardest thing is identifying what to change. And then it's changing your behavior. So that's, again, the outer part of the rim.
Yeah.
We can always change our behavior. If we talk too much, we can be quiet. If we, don't ask questions, we can ask more questions. So the last chapter, I've got kind of 10 steps to go through. And it's just like, I need to go to the gym or I need to be on a diet. It's that discipline, figuring out what it is, and then getting about and doing it.
That's good. That's good. All right, Marty, strap on the seatbelt. We have arrived at our speed round. Here we go. What makes you smile these days?
Oh, I'm a grandparent, so that's a really easy one. I've got 4 grandkids.
That's great. One of the greatest lessons you have learned in your life?
Is to be accept myself and to be generous with who I am and open about that.
Someone that inspires you, past or present?
There's one leader I talk about in the book. There's one area, another blind spot area in the intellect part is how do you know what you don't know? Those things that you're just like, oh, damn, I wish I would have known about that. So there was this one leader that was just amazing at asking questions of everybody all the time. He was collecting data, and I thought he was just being friendly and kind of warm, but the wheels were turning all the time. And that was like, boy, that's a great discipline.
All right. This episode will be released mid-November. We're winding down here towards the end of the year. Look ahead to 2026. What is your biggest hope for 2026?
I could talk about the world, but I certainly hope for peace. But I guess on a personal level, this book, I didn't intend to write a book, and this came out, and I kind of feel like I hit on something that is kind of a fresh movement, I guess. So I hope the book continues to proliferate and it sparks ideas for people and it does good out in the world.
There you go. All right, last question. Name a person, dead or alive, that you would like to have dinner with.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. Probably some artist, Picasso, Marc Chagall, somebody that just could see the world in a different way than the rest of us see the world. Probably somebody like that.
Love it. Love it. You have survived the speed round. All right, Marty, we bring it home as we do with every guest with 2 questions. Here we go. The first one is the leading with love question. Okay, so maybe sticking with some of the themes we talked about, how do I lead with more practical, actionable love day in and day out?
Yeah, it's probably another form of the answer I gave to one of the speed round questions is about love yourself. If you can love yourself for who you are, it's back to when you asked me about the changes. It's not about massive changes. It's just realizing your strengths, realizing your gaps or flat spots, and just be okay with that. And then say, all right, what do I do with what I got? What do I have?
Good, good. All right, bring us home, Marty. What's that one thing you want people to take away from this conversation?
That, you can make changes. And it's not the one word I wish would get banned from coaching and everything is transformation. It sounds wonderful, but it's impossible. I've never transformed anybody, nor have I transformed, nor could I, would I, should I. So small tweaks. Be aware that just start somewhere with a small change in self-awareness and in your behavior.
The book again is called Blindspotting. Folks, get this book. It's an important book to have if you are in a leadership role. Marty, if people want to connect with you, learn more about you and your work, where can they go?
Two places. I have an author website for the book, martindubin.com. And I've partnered with a company. We've created a blind spotting test to help you identify your blind spots. All that and other content is on blindspotting.com.
Very good. I'll make sure that all of that information is in the show notes. Folks, that's all we got for Dr. Martin Dubin and yours truly. Remember, in the end, love always wins. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Love in Action podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it, subscribe, and leave us a review. Until next time, don't forget, the future of leadership is love in action. Believe it, practice it, and watch your leadership and business flourish.